Ambassador, the belligerence we've seen from both sides, it has been far anything we've seen anywhere else. And this is after decades of conflict. They are at each other's throats, to say the least. The wise counsel that you mentioned, which can tone down, is US the only party that can be that wise counsel at this point, which can tone down that belligerence from both the sides, Israel and whether it's Hamas, whether it's PLO, whether it's any of these bodies that exist there? And is a statehood the only final solution which can bring that kind of durable peace? And without that statehood, you're only sowing seeds for a conflict to erupt anytime, given how volatile this region is. Do you see it that way?
You know, you make a very good point. That is statehood the only solution? And over the last few years, many wise people in Europe, in the US, amongst the Palestinians have raised this question, in Israel itself, that if a two-state solution physically is not possible, can you visualize a one state where everybody has equal rights? Or is it going to be a one state which was like apartheid in South Africa, where you have full rights for the Jewish community and far less rights for the Arab community? Remember, you've got, if you take all of Palestine, Israel, and the occupied territories, you've got roughly 7 million Arabs and 7 million Jews. It isn't a big difference in numbers. The challenge then is, Israel was the first state after Pakistan to be created in the name of religion. If Pakistan was intended as a state for the Muslims of the subcontinent, Israel was created as a state for the Jews. Can it be a Jewish state, yet give equal rights to Arabs? Can it not give equal rights to Arabs and still claim to be a democratic state? And I think those are the issues. There are many people who are today suggesting that, can we think out of the box? Can we think of a federated structure, a softer border? Can we look at other possibilities of integrating so that you have a more inclusive arrangement rather than a mutually exclusive one? And there are people open to discussing these. But I think realistically, at least in the current Israeli setup, unless there's a dramatic, radical change in government and there's a move back to centrist leaders like Yitzhak Rabin and Shimon Peres, who had the courage to stick their neck out, and in fact, Rabin paid with his life for signing the Oslo Accords. Do you have that possibility today for the consensus builders who will say, let's find the middle ground? Or are you really stuck with an extremist government in Israel and the maximalist demands of Hamas? I think the Palestine Authority leadership is much more willing to look at various solutions. And certainly the international community today, at least as of now, as seen in so many UN resolutions, continues to believe that the two-state solution is the only viable way forward.
I hear your point, sir. If we were to just talk about what's scheduled for a little later today now, the summit in Egypt, of course, that is the ceasefire summit. And, what is the motivation behind Trump calling this summit? And we discussed this a little earlier. Neither is Israel present, neither is Hamas. Iran is not going to be there. And the US president has called several stakeholders into this for this summit. What would be the major purpose? What are your thoughts on this?
You know, I actually think it's a smart move to get a lot of leaders from the Arab world, from the European side, and the US itself, to sit around and really sign off, show their commitment to the next steps that are so critical. And if they can, show that level of commitment, and not only commitment, but I don't see Americans putting out the money to rebuild Gaza. Clearly, that funding will have to come from some of the wealthier Gulf Arab states. So their participation in the proceedings in Sharm el-Sheikh today is crucial. I think if for the Europeans to be there in terms of their experience with peace building and so on is important. there'll be a lot of expertise needed going forward. So I think it's a smart move. It shows a degree of commitment at the highest level from multiple governments, and that would be one way to keep things moving.
Ambassador Suri, stay with me. I'll just cut across to the visuals that we have on the screens. These are ICRC Red Cross vehicles making their way to, they are in Khan Yunis. Several buses that can be seen, and we earlier heard of the prisoners that had boarded these buses and they were on their way to Khan Yunis, to the Nasser Medical Complex. Here we can see at least 8 buses, and this means that these are the prisoners and detainees that have been released by Israel. We will await a final confirmation from news agencies, but these are what the visuals are suggesting. All these buses coming in from the Red Cross going towards Nasser Hospital Complex in Khan Yunis. And we earlier heard of news of the prisoners and detainees that were released from Israeli prisons. They had boarded the buses and they are now on their way. On one hand, you have these buses. In all likelihood, they have the prisoners that have been released by Israel in exchange for the hostages that Hamas released. And on the other half of the screen, of course, you have everyone waiting in anticipation since the early morning hours in Tel Aviv at Hostages Square, waiting for the remaining hostages to come back. This is happening just before the US President Donald Trump arrives in Israel, and this is happening as per his peace plan. Let's listen into the visuals for a bit.
הצלחת להגיד להם משהו בשיחה?
שאני אוהבת אותם. יואו, אני... את כל הקיבוץ שם.
קיבוץ שלם ועם שלם, מאושר לכך כולם.
כולם. ולמי התקשרו? לאמא. ואני דחיתי את הטלפון, בהתחלה דחיתי את השיחה, כי לא הכרתי את הטלפון.
Yeah, for anybody just tuning in, you can see the ICRC, that's the Red Cross flag, and the logo and the vehicle which is following these buses that are on their way. In all likelihood, these buses have prisoners that have been released by Israel as part of the 20-point peace plan, which has gone into effect today. The first phase is what they're calling this. And as per this first phase, all hostages are going to be released by Hamas. And on the other side, in exchange of the 20 living hostages, Israel agreed to release nearly 2,000 prisoners taken in from Gaza. Prisoners and detainees taken in from Gaza over the course of the last 2 years and from even earlier. They are now making their way back to Khan Yunis. In Khan Yunis, they will be meeting their family members at the Nasser Medical Complex.